So now, please welcome the official, non-official, non-sponsor of the Savannah Bananas, but a big fan. Please welcome John Fletcher.
Well, thank you, my friend Jesse Cole, owner of the Savannah Bananas, and welcome to this edition of 15 on Fridays with Fletch. Today's guest is a physician and author who I met through our mutual friend, Doug Renfro. Dr. David Teitelbaum has practiced osteopathic manipulation, prolotherapy, spinal decompression, and acupuncture in Fort Worth for over 35 years. He's best known for treating the soul as much as the body. He's authored such books as A Physician Studies the Healings of Jesus, and his latest book is about optimal brain wellness. He has an interesting faith journey since he was raised as a Jew and has become a Christian. So please welcome Dr. David Teitelbaum. David, tell me what it's like to be a Jew who becomes a Christian.
Well, to fully understand that, I want to go into my story a bit. I was born and raised as a Reform Jew, which is a liberal branch of Judaism. And I just had a desire in my heart to have a personal relationship with God, starting as young as age 9. So I looked into many different things at a very young age, including Eastern religions, which made sense to me, and learned how to do meditation. When I was at A&M, where I studied to become a veterinarian, a fellow spiritual seeker who had been a friend from Dallas called me and told me he had become a Christian. And I thought he had lost his mind. I didn't think much of it, but he made me promise to go to the house church where he said he had found the Lord, and I didn't even know what that meant. But out of respect for him, I did go with another friend, and they had a Bible study, which did nothing for me. And then they invited us to stay for their service, and I wanted to leave, but the guy who'd give me a ride said he wanted to stay. So we went into their chapel, which this really was a house church. It was a living room that had been separated from the rest of the house with a curtain. And all that was in there were some candles and a podium and some folding chairs. So while we were sitting there waiting for the service to start, I felt the presence of Christ descend upon me. And again, I'd been meditating for some time. I knew what it was to be still and silent. And this was different. There was a personality there. And that began my Christian walk. I studied the Bible through the years. My wife has been real instrumental in that. She was raised Christian. And so that's how I got here.
Well, so tell me how this impacts your insights on life. You've got a more diverse background than most of us do.
Yes. It's been tremendous. In my practice, I started off actually as an introvert. And I realized that a problem I was going to have in practice was there were patients who I couldn't really relate to, and some actually, honestly, that I didn't care for. In studying Christianity, Jesus was once asked, what are the greatest commandments? And he said the first one is to love God with all your heart, all your soul, all of your mind, and all of your might. And the second is like unto it, love your neighbor as yourself. So he was asked for one commandment, he gave 2. And they seem to be in that necessary order. There are people out there who are simply hard to like, not just the sociopaths and the really trying people, but even people with different cultures, different ideas than we have. So I learned to start praying for people and praying for God to open my heart towards them. And as a result of that, I found that I was able to have compassion and get along with pretty much everybody. And it really helped me out in my practice. So I think that's probably the greatest thing I got out of my whole Christian walk, aside from my relationship with God itself, is my caring for others.
Well, has this helped you pretty well when you're counseling people to be able, so whether they're Jewish or Christian or any other faith that they might be, to be more compassionate, more understanding?
Yes, absolutely. What I found is I always approach it open-endedly. So wherever they are, I approach just by asking questions. On my intake form, for example, I have a question that says, do you have a source of spiritual strength that you can turn to in times of trouble? And that it opens up the way for people to talk to me if they wish, and for me to completely respect where they are and work with them from there. I found I particularly have a heart for people who are atheistic, because it seems to me to be so difficult to go through life without any sort of God concept to fall back on. when you're facing troubled times.
Absolutely. Well, you wrote about a physician studies the healings of Jesus. Tell us about that.
Yeah, that is one of my books now available on Amazon. I was always fascinated by the healings of Jesus. There are 26 of these in scriptures in the Gospels that are sufficiently elaborated on enough to draw lessons from them. And some of them have to do with demons, and those are really interesting. Some of them actually explain the role of sin in disease and how that's contributory, and how Jesus handled that relative to the beliefs that were common at the time. There are three raisings from the dead, which support the Christian belief of being resurrected after we die. And then there were the controversial healings that he did on the Sabbath that evoked the ire of the authorities who felt that he should have postponed those and not done them on the Sabbath. So there's just a lot of lessons to be had there. And I realized others would be fascinated by that as well. So I put it all into a book that goes through each one of them.
That's amazing. Well, in your new book talks about optimal brain health, the doctor's guide to natural treatments for memory, clarity, and preventing. So tell us about that.
Yeah, that's also now available on Amazon. It turns out cognitive decline is probably 60% preventable. And that's actually become a mission for me now, to inform as many people as I can in my practice, but just everybody I can reach with the book on how they can do things to keep their brain sharp and functioning even into an advanced age, which is why I wrote the book. And it's not just about diet and exercise. Those, of course, are very, very important. But there's actually 12 categories of strategies that can be undertaken according to what the individual wants to do. And it can help with things like brain fog, moodiness. It can help with focus. And of course, it helps prevent cognitive decline, which was my initial venture into writing the book.
So tell us what some of the most important takeaways are for us to understand and implement about brain wellness.
Well, it's going to vary with the individual. So I think the first takeaway is to realize not to try and do everything all at once. If you went through the book and there were a bunch of things you would like to try, what we find in medicine and in psychology is people who try and take on a whole bunch of things at the same time tend not to stay with it. So it's better to add just one or two things at a time. For example, when I learned that green tea is a very, very healthy thing to drink, I added 1 glass a day of green tea, and it turned out to be very easy to do, simple thing to do. There is a mushroom extract, lion's mane mushrooms, which tend to help out with memory. Very, very good research behind that. And everything in the book has the scientific research behind it. And I wanted to be clear, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to write it as a physician. So you can just add this mushroom powder to your coffee if you wish in the mornings, and that works real well.
Tell us about what the greatest misunderstandings are about brain health. I know there's so many things that are written, and you know, if you want to find a thousand different takeaways, just read 1,000 different reviews online.
Yes, that is true. That's why I wanted to keep mine scientific. But probably the biggest misunderstanding is how preventable it is. People don't realize that it is as much as 60% preventable. We're doing a lot of this to ourselves, which pessimistically, yes, is a horrible thing, but optimistically, it means there's a lot we can do to reverse this. It does mean you have to make some counter cultural changes in your life and sometimes push yourself to do a little bit more.
Well, you talked about the green tea is an easy adjustment to make. What are a couple of the more difficult adjustments that people make? Like you said, they're not going to really implement all 12 all at one time, hopefully not on day one. If you were to say, these are the ones that may be a little bit more challenging depending upon the individual, what would those be?
Mhm. Well, again, depending on the individual, which is the key word, exercise can be tough for some people. There are people who hate it. About 20% of the population just really enjoys exercising. So obviously, they're not going to have to do much there. If you're a mediocre exerciser, I'd say wherever you are now, try adding 15% to whatever it is that you're doing. If you absolutely hate exercise, and I have patients who do, a minimum, absolute minimum is 30 minutes 3 times a week. Now, that is an absolute minimum, but that's where we start seeing changes in cognition improving. And if you hate everything, then get an instrument of your choice, an exercise tool. I recommend an elliptical because it moves your arms and your legs, but a treadmill works just fine, or a stationary bicycle is fine. And just sit on that, put it in front of a video screen and watch something you like for 30 minutes and just power through it. That would be your absolute minimum. For everybody else, try and find something you enjoy. And it's okay to skip around. I've done yoga, I've done Tai Chi, I've worked out in a gym. Um, I've done all kinds of fun things. And I did golf for a while. All these are fun. And so try and find something you enjoy. That makes it much easier to stay with. Probably the most difficult to implement would be hormone balance. That's going to definitely require medical supervision, and it'll require some blood work, some blood lab to be done, and then someone who knows what they're doing to watch over you while you're doing that.
Well, as you're wanting people to expand their intellectual capabilities to keep their brain active, tell me about reading. If somebody's not an avid reader, do we need to try to start off with something that they really like and then expand, or what's the best method or the
Mhm.
path for them?
Yeah, well, if you hate to read, there's the big thing is mental stimulation. So some people love to do puzzles. That's fine. Um, it's best. The concept is you want to build as many pathways mentally as you can to get to your destination. So it's like driving in Fort Worth, for example. There's always some streets under construction. Sometimes they close. Well, if you know an alternative route to how to get to somewhere, then that's the route you take. So it turns out that you can train your brain to develop new pathways by simply pushing yourself to learn new things. So you can take classes at a local university. You can watch documentaries online. You can interact with other people, which is great. People who you can have intelligent discussions with. Reading is excellent. Um, there are other things as well. Puzzles are great. Learning a foreign language is one of the strongest for brain development. Take up a musical instrument. It doesn't have to be a tough musical instrument. It can be the things that children learn at school. As long as it's something you haven't done before, it's going to challenge you.
I've had,
Originally, you
go ahead,
well,
go ahead.
originally you would hear things like crossword puzzles, which is great. But if you've done crossword puzzles all your life, you're not building new pathways just by doing them. So it helps to really challenge yourself to try something you haven't done before.
And one example of a pathway, I know that I've done it a couple times and I thought I should do this more often, is when I'm driving, say from Arlington, where I live, down to maybe to Camp Bowie in Fort Worth, to be aware of all the side streets and just start paying attention, being more observant of the cars that pass me, to the green, the red, whatever they are. Be able to look and see one or two people in the car, whatever it is, almost like the kids when you're traveling and it's counting the horses or counting the four-legged
Mhm.
animals. Do little things like that form extra stimulation benefits?
Yes, absolutely.
And so,
Absolutely.
and so as
And
we got,
socialization is important. I found that, especially in these times, it's just a kind thing to do to recognize people who wait on you by their name if they're wearing a name tag, or you can even ask them what their name is if they're, a waiter or waitress in a restaurant. Check out people at the grocery store. Anybody who's doing anything mundane or routine, if you can actually smile at them, if you have the financial means to do so, tip them a little bit more. Just do something to be pleasant. That socialization, that helps. And being generous actually helps with brain development. They find people who are more generous tend to do better as far as cognitive wellness.
well, then also you used a word a moment ago, kindness. And when we try to be intentionally kind to others, I think that we find ourselves, we see a better version of ourselves, don't we?
Absolutely. And that actually is one of the strategies in the book, has to do with not just socialization, but serving others, doing things that are to some extent pushing yourself, some sort of self-sacrifice to do for others. It certainly doesn't have to be money. It can simply be a kind act.
Right. Well, David, thank you so much. This has been so wonderful. And your new book just out now, Optimal Brain Wellness, A Doctor's Guide to Natural Treatments for Memory, Clarity, and Preventing. That's going to be so wonderful. Looking forward to reading that. And thank you for being our guest today on 15 on Fridays with Fletch. We look forward to having you come back again soon.
Thank you, John. I appreciate that.